shows the ruling party rely on the internet. For us, that's the best way to mitigate internet connection. Thank you.
Okay, that's quite insightful. So if your governments don't depend on the internet for their elections, they will shut it down. Yeah, okay, great. So I want to quickly ask the panel just one question each, and then we can move on to opening it to the audience here. So Robert, coming back to you, and we've also heard Emmanuel talk about how Togo shut down the internet before, but then now the internet is continuously throttled, and how it's difficult for them as a journalist, as activists, to document that. So if you can quickly talk about some of the research you plan to do and what can sort of be done in that space to cover that, and then we can head out.
Okay, so some of the research that we're doing is based on, as I said, moving from researching just shutdowns to researching the ecosystem. So there's a legal aspect to it. So looking at how do you legislate, and as Emmanuel, I'm glad for the efforts that you guys are doing in that. And I think the biggest hurdle there is that, yes, it is easy to say that we need digital rights, but it's very difficult to balance those rights with national security interests. And as a gentleman said, government's only interested in controlling people. So we don't yet have that much deep research in how you, first of all, define digital rights. So if we don't define the normal rights that we have offline, freedom of expression, assembly, access, association, privacy, if we don't define those properly and define their scope in a manner that helps us to understand how they can be breached online, then we won't be able to understand the levels to which control can happen on that plane, okay? So that's the first kind of research that we really need, and that's, we've been trying to attempt to do that at least on the 5 digital rights that we've identified, as I've mentioned. Then from there, where we're trying to also have another study about legislative drafting, actual, realistic, how do you make sure that this reflects in the law. Another initiative that we're having, as I said, is embarking on studies for just understanding throttling. The difficulty there is you can have business-driven throttling. So you buy a bundle from your ISP or your telecom provider, and they say you can only use so much. After that, they throttle, right? You still have such policies. How do you differentiate that from censorship-driven throttling, where they actually are controlling it, but you can't know? So we're having a study on that as well. And let me see what else we can focus on here. The other research that we're doing is on understanding fake news. So it's particularly in Kenya. There's data we collected during the 2017 elections, but it takes, first of all, even learning techniques like sentiment analysis to be able to analyze, let's say, Twitter data about how did this disinformation campaign happen. And that's very tricky, and also really just some of those social media platforms themselves have the actual data, and there's other efforts. There's organizations that are just coming up to say, look, Facebook, Twitter, we need this data, can you release it, because researchers need to study that. So I'll just leave it at that.
Maybe Guyo, yeah, you want to go on this one? Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say, fighting against internet shutdown is not about having a legal framework. We think it's about putting a pressure on the government. And for that, you need to build a national and international coalition. That's the only way to go. In Senegal, we got all legal frameworks that protect digital rights. But our main problem is enforcement. So it's not about having legal framework. It's how you're going to work in order to put pressure on the government. And we did that. That's why before the election, the government made 2 official denials saying that there will never be internet shutdown in Senegal. That's fake news. We had that back because we did a lot of noise about that. And for that, you got to involve a lot of civil society organization. Don't work only with civil societies that are on the same issues than you, like that work on digital rights. Work with union, work with political parties, work with everybody, academic, in order to create a strong public opinion that fight against those risks you're facing. It's not at all about legal stuff. We are in Africa, they don't care.
Emmanuel, a quick comment on that, and then we can.
Okay, I think I share his view partially for one reason. I share his view on the legal framework. I think legal framework is part of the job, okay? But I don't think it does it all, as he was saying. But I think in our context, when I say our context, I'm talking about Francophone Africa as a whole, where we still have autocratic regimes. It's a difference between, for example, Senegal and Togo. Because if you have a democratic transition in a country, the political will in that country is completely different from the regimes that want to stay there for other decades to come. So in the case of Togo, for example, I think what we are doing right now is preparing the ground for the change, because it's very important. The change is coming. We can see it from all over Africa. Algeria last time, it just fell down. It may happen elsewhere in Africa, I won't mention, but it's very important to prepare the ground. Have a legal framework, have strong institutions, so when the change happen, it will be very easy, to come out with those. Because in some countries, for example, and I don't have any fear of saying it, in my country, the justice is in jail. Okay? So if the justice is in jail in your country for the moment, it doesn't mean you stop actually working on legal frameworks. So I think it's very important for civil society to collaborate, as he said. That's the view I share with him. It's very good because there is an African proverb who said that a single bracelet doesn't jingle. That's a Congolese proverb. So it's very important for us to be in a coalition so we can jingle more, like make more noise, and also after the noise, come with the law. We should back all our actions, all our demands with a law, so that it will be very easy to take the state to justice, to take the individuals that are behind those shutdowns. Because when it comes to shutdown, sometimes it's one individual person sitting somewhere and taking that decision. I remember when the internet was shut down in Togo, a minister said, "What do I need the internet for? It's just my children. If it was not my children, I would not have internet in my house." So you see, so it's matter of interest. They are not interested about using the internet, but we the citizens, we are very interested about it. So it's very important to work on those two elements, the legal framework and also the coalitions to support our actions.
Thank you so much for that. I think one important thing to take away from that is preparing the ground for change. Many of us that, like, if you look at Sudan, Algeria, Ethiopia, and many other countries in this continent that have been swept by change, I don't think many of us were really prepared for the actual change to come. So please learn from us. Prepare all of those legal briefs. Yeah, with that, I want to open it to the audience if there are any questions. If not, the four of us are happy to continue to talk. And I'm hoping there's a mic roaming around.
Merci, je remercie l'ensemble du panel. Je suis Franco Yami du Bénin,
Okay.
de la République du Bénin, non de la cité du Bénin. J'aime bien toujours le préciser. Alors, parlons des coupures d'Internet. J'aimerais quand même qu'on reconnaisse qu'il y a plusieurs types de coupures d'Internet. Il y a la coupure où quelqu'un, quelque part, peut prendre une rage et aller couper la fibre à l'arrivée du pays et tout le pays est déconnecté. On peut également rendre plus difficile l'accès à certains types de contenus. On peut également intimider les gens et les empêcher soit d'avoir accès à l'information, soit de la produire, simplement. Et c'est le cas quand on a par exemple des législations qui ne touchent pas vraiment directement à l'accès à Internet, mais qui touchent à la production d'informations et à la publication d'informations sur Internet. Et avec le phénomène des fake news aujourd'hui, et tous les gouvernements s'en saisissent sous des prétextes de sécurité, de protection des populations, ainsi de suite, on est capable, en utilisant ces instruments légaux, d'aller intimider, par exemple, certains journalistes, d'aller intimider certains leaders d'opinion, d'aller intimider certains chercheurs qui publient de l'information ou qui prennent position sur certaines choses, certains aspects, et de leur interdire donc l'accès à Internet ou bien l'utilisation d'Internet ou la divulgation d'informations. Et cette forme de coupure d'Internet, parce que moi j'appelle ça coupure d'Internet, est beaucoup plus pernicieuse que la coupure simple qui est visible, tout le monde s'en rend compte, il suffit de regarder les graphes d'utilisation d'Internet sur le pays, on te dit, bon, l'Internet a été coupé, tout le monde se lève, et cette forme donc d'intimidation qui est vraiment pernicieuse, qui est en fait une forme de coupure d'Internet qui est en train de se développer au sein de nos différents pays-là. Je n'en veux pour preuve que récemment, au sein de mon pays, un journaliste a été envoyé devant une cour de répression des infractions économiques et du terrorisme, simplement parce qu'il aurait publié un article où il affirmait que l'économie béninoise serait surendettée. Je mets tout ça au conditionnel, pour ne pas m'attirer d'ennui par ailleurs. Mais bon, voilà, moi, des choses qui m'inquiètent aujourd'hui et qui font que nous devons rester vigilants sur les nouvelles façons dont ceux qui ont le pouvoir ou qui pensent avoir le pouvoir pourraient utiliser la loi pour empêcher les gens vraiment d'avoir accès à Internet, d'utiliser Internet. Et donc, ce sont de nouvelles formes de coupure d'Internet qui sont en train de se développer. Et je pense qu'à l'avenir, nous verrons de nouvelles formes qui utilisent différents arguments légaux pour empêcher les gens d'avoir accès à Internet. Il faut qu'on se rende compte aussi d'une chose, c'est que nos gouvernements n'aiment pas ceux qui ne comprennent pas. Ils ont peur vraiment de ceux qui ne comprennent pas. Et donc, Internet est la nouvelle forme de pouvoir que cela permet aux populations, leur fait peur aujourd'hui, et ils ne savent pas très bien comment gérer ça. Et c'est pour ça que j'aime bien l'exemple sénégalais qui dit que pour ne plus avoir une coupure d'Internet, il faut s'arranger pour que les gouvernants vraiment utilisent Internet. Et je m'en arrêterai là. Merci.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Shenia Jai is my name. I'm from Kidas for Change. I just want to make a short contribution as regards the issue of internet shutdown in Africa. And I think I agree with the guy from Senegal that, of course, there is need to build a broad coalition against it. Secondly, I think it's majorly a political question on the continent, and I think it's necessary for us to see also the private interest or the class interest that is also involved. And this is why I disagree that our freedoms can actually have what the other guy emphasized, the question of national security and freedom. I think national security interest, to be specific, the way he presented it. I think we should be very clear. It is not a national security issue, because national security, first and foremost, needs to be well defined. It is a private interest that does not want, there to be freedom for all. It is not our collective interest to say that internet, our rights, to freedom of speech should be restricted in any way. And I think this interest needs to be well defined, so that when we are putting forward a collective program, we can know what is actually the problem. And I think it's also important, going by what he emphasized, that there's need to actually expand the scope, expand in the area of trying to build in the coalition of, or in a way, build a movement, a political movement, essentially, around people, who share the views that freedom must be institutionalized on the continent, and that all these peculiar interests, which are actually against the collective, needs to be thrown out of power. Essentially, that's what needs to be done on the continent as at this particular point in time. Thank you very much.
Hello. Hello. My name is Peter Kinam. I manage the Youth Internet Governance Forum in Liberia. And couple of questions I want to throw forward. What, from your own perspective as panelists up there, what can you suggest on the document of the African Declaration on Internet Rights and Freedom? How can we popularize it? Because this affects our issue of internet shutdown. And then if you look at it critically, in 2016, 11 out of the 56 shutdowns were in Africa. And gradually in 2007 and 17, 12 instances happened, 9 of them was in Africa. Looking at the level of it, somewhere in services that had a lot of impact on our digital economy. My question is, what can civil society do as digital rights advocates to ensure that these shutdowns doesn't affect our economy and then also affect our right to access to information?
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is James Ladu Modi. I'm from South Sudan, and I hold the position of Executive Director for United Nations Advocates for Youth Empowerment and Development Organization. I'm very happy to hear the reaction from the internet shutdown. Where I came from, it has been really a big issue in which almost every internet forums were being shut down. For instance, we have the BBC radio shut down, and there's Radio Tomato shut down, and there's also a BOA recently been shut down in South Sudan. So if you go to the newspaper, now the social media newspaper, out of 50 previously, or 100, we only have 3 newspaper working. We have the Juba Monitor newspaper working, the Dawn newspaper, and Al Mogib Arabic newspaper. The rest are gone. So it has really been tough, and we don't know as a citizen what to do, though some of us knew, but they have a capacity to stop the shutting down of the internet. As the expert, how do I go ahead with this issue of internet shutdown as an individual in the country, or what can we do as a civil society? Because where that the issue was, there's no ability that we raise. We can raise the ability, but you'll either be in the jail or you lose your life. So sometimes it's very, very difficult for you to make noise. It's very difficult for you to raise your, your voice out, because if you raise, you either lose your life or you have been put in jail. So what can we do as a community of South Sudan, or what can we do as a community of Africa? Not only South Sudan, we heard previously issues in Burundi too. Burundi has a problem. The media there is almost also diminishing. So there's really big problems in Africa. So thank you.
Great. We'll answer these questions. I would hold off on giving the mic. Yeah, thanks. Let them answer this question so that we can come back to it. We still have around, I think, 30 minutes to have this conversation, so I'll give the panelists a chance to respond to this, and then we can come back to it. And thank you so much for bringing the issue of traditional censorship of the news media and newspaper as well. So anyone can feel free to take this on.
I think I'll take the African Declaration. He asked about how can we promote the declaration in our various countries. I think I'll give an example. It will make it more practical. Recently, very recently, there was a website that was shut down in Cameroon. And I think Uni and Access Now, NetBlocks, Reporter Without Border, I mean, all the networks were behind to see what we can do. It was very funny because when a letter was sent from Paris to the government of Cameroon asking them why the website was shut down because it was the most popular news site in Cameroon, the answer was very simple. Do we have any law that prevents anyone in the country to ban a website if the website threats our national security? They were right. But what was interesting is Reporter Without Border was only able to actually quote the African Declaration because I think it's a declaration that all African countries are aware of, and I think even the judges in those countries are aware of. So it was very easy, for example, to say, you know something, Cameroon is actually part of this declaration, and the declaration said this. So it was very easy to quote it, to explain to them that, you know, this and this and this, you abide by it, although you don't have a national legislation that talk about it. So I think the African Declaration, there's a different way we can promote it. As I said, it's useful in some cases, but it will be very important to actually train the judiciary, because the lawyers, the judges, the prosecutors that the state is using, you know, to actually do their how do I call it? Okay, I don't want to use those words. So I think the judges that the government has been using to actually do their work for them, it is very important to actually train those judges on the declaration, because some of them are not aware of the content of that declaration. So it will be very important to identify those judges in the judiciary, build their capacity. I know it's a matter of funding and co, but it's very important for those who are promoting the declaration to train the judiciary on those different treaties that their government have abide on. And it's also very important to integrate the declaration in our litigation process as civil society organizations. So when we are going to court in those cases, it will be very important to introduce the declaration in our litigation processes so that our government will be very aware of it and know that although we refuse to vote, you know, laws in our country that promote digital rights, we are actually abide to a declaration that oblige us to actually respect digital rights in our countries. So that's my take.
You want to take on some of the issues that were raised?
Yes, what to do again for fighting internet shutdown? One thing I want to point out again is, bottom line, you need to know what you're talking about. In order to convince other organizations to support you, you need to have knowledge. You need to have expertise. That's right? Expertise? Yes. You need to have expertise in order to convince other people. I'm going to give you one example. We had in Senegal a joint statement signed by 300 civil society organizations, local civil society organizations. In order to achieve that, you need to know what you're talking about. You need to know expertise. If you have that, you're going to have the support of the local media, the press. In Senegal, when we make press statement, this got republished by almost lot of local media. So, if you got that, the government start thinking this guy is serious. He know what he's talking about. Because when you start talking, they just say, that's okay, he's just talking. He doesn't know what he's talking about. They don't take you seriously. You as an organization, you have to show that you have the expertise for what you're talking about. And this way, you can monitor whatever they do. That's why when we got the support from ARNI, when they gave us authorization to use their application, we made a press release about it. So government knew that we have a tool to monitor internet connectivity during election. So that's a very important aspect of our advocacy campaign against internet shutdown. But I want to point out another thing. Internet did not play was not a good tool during this advocacy campaign. When we were posting messages on Facebook, Twitter, there were not a lot of reaction from Senegalese people. That's a traditional media that helps us a lot because we participate in a lot of TV show, a lot of radio show, and we did a lot of interview through traditional media. So this make you think, don't take it for granted that internet going to give you the power you need in order to win an advocacy campaign. Start by using traditional media. That's another thing we learned from our experience.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Robert?
I'm going to do a more like general response because I think the questions were a bit varied, but I think that, so first of all, I think I disagree with the gentleman that says it's just a private issue, it's a private interest and not a national security issue. We have to really think about this from the government perspective, as you rightly said. We have to think about everyone's interest. So like if you look at Kenya, every time we've had a terrorist attack, there's been tightening of security laws, including the terrorism law, and then that goes to court and is declared unconstitutional for breaching freedom of expression and things like that. And it's happened, and right now it's the third cycle. We passed a Cyber Crimes Act last year. 26 sections are suspended because the bloggers went to court and said, this is infringing on our freedom of expression. So we have to concentrate everyone on their powers and their strengths. We have to play to our strengths, but that doesn't mean that we dismiss coalition building, but that doesn't also mean that we don't concentrate on legislation making and, as you were saying, preparing the ground. Because as I'm saying, what I'm saying in other words is, what we've discovered with government and lawmakers, if they don't understand the issue properly, they will legislate from a point of fear. You've seen even London shut down the internet on the tube. Is it this week or past week?
Last weekend.
Last week, right?
Yeah.
So they need to be able to understand the issues, and it needs to be presented to them in a way that makes sense, like you're very rightly saying. And therefore, we have to get into spaces. We have to think about what our organizations can do and spaces that we can get into. So like I'm from a research center in a university, but we realized we have to broaden, and we recently went to court to apply to be amicus in the digital rights case in Kenya right now. And Berhan was there to support me. We lost our application, but maybe we don't have good experience, but we all have to think about how and what spaces we can get into. The other thing we're getting into is norm making at the African level. So as you were saying, the African Court of Human Rights, the protocol is being updated to include internet rights. So the Declaration on Freedom of Expression by the HCHPR. You can think about, can we contribute to that process? Again, right there's a lot of coalition building, and we can definitely see how to do that. Lastly, I'd say we also really do need to understand the relationship with traditional media, how it's been regulated. So yes, Kenya didn't shut down the internet in 2017, but, sorry, in 2017, but in 2018, January, we shut down four media stations. So some people speculated that it's just that maybe there was not that much internet use, and the main populace was still in radio and TV, and that's where they shut it down. So we're thinking hard about, was it a policy issue, or is it that maybe in 2022 we're going to actually see because you know, as more and more Kenya has grown, and there's a big trend online about being able to hold government accountable on Twitter and things like that.
Yeah, one more thing I want to point out. If you want to involve local media, the main argument you can use is to let them know that the first people who are going to be impacted by internet shutdown are journalists. Right now, the main tools they use in their work is internet. Without internet, they can do anything. That way, talking with journalists, we receive their support in our advocacy campaign. But one more thing that is very important to do is to talk to local ISP. You need to talk to them, the management of the ISP. We did have a meeting with them and let them know that, especially the one in Senegal who call it Orange, who is present in about 12 African countries, mobile network operator, name it Orange. We had a meeting with them and let them know the right you preserve for your European customer, you have to preserve it for African customer. Orange, you are a member of Global Network Initiative whose aim is to protect privacy and freedom of expression worldwide. So, if you enforce those objectives in Europe, you have to do it in Africa too. So, we cannot let you, by the order of the government, to shut down internet in Senegal. Government makes the decision, but network operator, internet service provider, enforce that decision. So, in your advocacy campaign, make sure to talk to these people. And we let them know, if you shut down internet during election, we are ready to run a boycott campaign of your product. And we were ready to make a press release about it. So you got to talk about all stakeholders. It's not about crying on the media or on the internet. You have to be serious. It's a job you have to do. If you want the government to take you seriously, you have to be professional. Here is what I want. You have to be professional. Thank you.
Turn off yours. Great, thank you so much for that. So we'll take another 3 rounds of questions and then we'll conclude. So I remember there was a hand up there. So we'll do Maria sitting here in front, the back over there, and the other person over there. So let's start with Maria and then go that way. The person with the mic. Okay, you can start, I guess, until the other mic comes. It's fine.
Yeah, I am Aliuso from the Gambia. We've witnessed internet is just a contribution that I'm making. We witnessed internet shutdown in 2016 election. But prior to that, you can ask, I don't know what the percentage is going to be, but when you ask Gambian if that is possible, the root. And then we started seeing network getting slower and slower and slower. To a point, 2 days before election, we had a total shutdown. Even normal telephone communication was not going. No one can call from outside of the Gambia, and in the Gambia too, you cannot call outside. You cannot call international. The only image of the election that we had was from a BBC photo that was taken through and shared on satellite, whatever. So from there, after the election, 2 days after, internet service was normal, and then we knew what happened, because Gambians heavily rely on social media, especially those in the diaspora, to push for a regime change that the government realized lately. So when this new government came, I was talking to our friend who was like, what is the likelihood of another internet shutdown in the Gambia with all the promise that the new government is making? I was like, you don't trust governments when it comes to this, because one man is involved, that is the president. If the president feels his or her position is threatened, they turn to things that can protect them. But with more advocacy, people knowing more about this, the damages that internet shutdown caused to countries would definitely help in this fight. And most of the time, people only focus on the economic aspect, because government will say we shut it down because of security reasons, and then the advocates would use economic points to say we shouldn't shut down the internet. I believe there is a lot of stakeholders involved in this, like the health sector, the environment, everything around the economy is affected. Because I understand, for instance, Gambia, some of the things that we do is like when someone needs a blood donation, people share this information through social media. And during those periods, imagine how would some of this information be shared. So when advocates are fighting for this, they should involve everyone, every stakeholder in the community in trying to show the importance of internet in our country. Because at the end of the day, when it's shut down, it creates a lot of problems, but at the end of the day, it's just one person who benefits from the internet shutdown. So, and also advocates too should be helped with tools and materials. Like the case of Senegal is just something that I'm learning, that there are tools that you can use to know the internet is being interfered with, where generally people can come up and then fight against some of these things? Thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Okay, that was loud. Hi, my name is Maria. I work with Ernie. I'm actually happy that you raised that question about whether there are any tools that can be used to monitor network interference and internet shutdowns. One of such tools is UNI or UniProbe, which is a software that my project develops. You can easily get it by, if you go to the Play Store on Android and you type UNI, OONI, ONI, not to be confused with Oni of Ife, different UNI. You will find the app. It's also available on iOS. And essentially, that is designed to measure the blocking of different websites. If you hear that, if you're in Cameroon, for example, and you hear that CameroonWeb.com is blocked, you can, on the spot, type in the website in the app and tap Run, and it will test it in that moment. Of course, you need to be in Cameroon, connected to an ISP locally, because it does local testing. And you will instantly get results in the app. And the results will tell you whether it's blocked or not, and they will also tell you how it is blocked, how the specific internet provider is blocking access to that website. And it will also give you the raw technical data, which can serve as evidence. And the reason why I'm saying this is because then you can then show this data to an ISP or to a government who is denying that they blocked access to that website and say, you know what, you can say whatever you want, you can seek plausible deniability, but here's the data that actually shows that access to this website was blocked. Similarly, the app also includes tests for testing the blocking of social media like WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Telegram. And so, yeah, so I definitely encourage you to use that. And if you're interested in learning more about this, I'll actually be facilitating a session at the end of day 2 where we can get into this in more detail. But then when you're interested in understanding internet blackouts, like when the internet is shut down completely, as happened temporarily in Zimbabwe earlier this year and has happened in many other places across Africa, there are a number of third-party data sets which are extremely useful for checking to see whether the internet shut down completely and to use that again as evidence. One data source of the sort is called IOTA, which I highly recommend. They also have some great dashboards that visually show what is happening, and they provide constant alerts where you can go there and check to see what is happening, whether the internet has been shut down on a country level, regional level, AS level. Other data resources is the BGB data that is aggregated and published by RIPE. But yeah, we can discuss this all further. I guess, sorry for that very long information sharing. The question I wanted to ask is, how can tool projects like UNI, like ourselves, best support you in your advocacy efforts when fighting internet shutdowns? What are the types of things that we could be doing better or be doing differently? What are the ways that we can support you?
Perfect. Thanks, Maria. There was a hand over there, but I guess the person is shy. So okay, so the last person over there. Thanks.
Hi, so my name is Bryn. I wanted to ask, based on the discussion that we've had so far around legal frameworks and problems with enforceability, what role there is to play for kind of classical strategic litigation. And I'm thinking here of Zimbabwe as a good example, where the act in terms of which the order for the internet shutdown was granted doesn't actually authorize the public officials to make the kind of order. And so there's kind of a very basic procedural argument to be made that the internet shutdown is illegitimate because it wasn't, enacted in terms of an act that actually gave the government that authority. And often when you bring cases like that, if it's based on something kind of less controversial than a principle such as freedom of expression that's contested and that advocacy is difficult to do around, if you bring a case on a more procedural aspect, you're able to then bring or hope, you get the result that you want, and you hope that at the same time they'll make pronouncements that might in future allow you to advocate for the cause further. So do you think that there's a role for that kind of strategic litigation to play in furthering digital rights, or do you think that the two are too far removed from one another?
Thank you for that. So who wants to take that first? Yes,
okay,
brave one.
I will take it first and you contribute. I think strategic litigation is something very important when it comes to this space we are working on right now. Because when you take, I always talk about home because I know home more. When you take the litigation ongoing or the court case ongoing right now at the ECOWAS court for the internet shutdown in Togo, there's two things to learn. One, the state is aware that the next time we shut down the internet, it comes with consequences. That's one. Even if we don't win the case, it doesn't matter. They know that the next time they will do it, more cases will follow. And who knows, one day we may win. That's one thing which is good in strategic litigation. I think the other one too is when you go to court, okay, a civil society organization, to sue the government when it comes to violation of digital rights, and it actually raised awareness to the general public, because more the media is talking about it, the bad publicity is going on. I don't think the government the next time will do it again, or even if it will do it, it will reduce the way of doing it. So that's, in my case, what I think strategic litigation can help.
Thanks, Ben. I think I would also add that I think it's useful. But again, they need a basis for being able to act. So you need to be able to give, I think what you were saying, we still need to work on legislation. And in this, I'm saying the definition of digital rights, if that's defined in laws well enough, then governments can be able to use it. I'll take the example of Kenya. We still don't have a Privacy Act, for instance. Been debating this probably since 2007, according to some. That hasn't stopped the court from using the article in the Constitution to grant rights again and again against government, even presidential declarations. So I think anything that can help judges hold on to, then they can be able to rule it. My problem with strategic litigation is that it's very expensive. So our amicus brief failed as it was. We're still paying a legal bill that is like, and we didn't have a budget for it, right? So how do we source money for litigation? And also because the stakes were higher, we had to get an even better lawyer. So it gets tricky. We really have to have that difficult conversation about funding. Yeah, and I think also to answer, or just to ask Maria, definitely we need more research about how to do especially on-site live demonstration areas where we can measure the internet. It's difficult. I don't know how we're going to do that, and I definitely want to come to your session and we'll have longer discussions about that. But when people are demonstrating and it's a live scenario, how can we tell? Because those are the people that will tweet and do things, but then realize that, oh, the information is actually not going out. So we definitely need help in that regard.
We did in Senegal to work on that scenario. In case of internet shutdown, can we go to court? Can we sue the government? On that scenario, the main issue we have are having evidence of internet shutdown. How are you going to document this internet shutdown? How are you going to do to have those evidence? Only the data they give you legally are not acceptable by the court in Senegal. You have evidence collected by, how to tell it in English, huissier de justice. Pronator, I think. Pronator, I think, right? That's the pronator. The guy who collects the evidence for the judge. How we call it? Pronator? In French, we call it huissier de justice. Okay. That's the guy who collects evidence for the court. And those people don't work on Sunday, the day of the election. They don't work. you going to do? Try to see the chief of that corporation who gives him a special authorization. And in order to get that authorization for this guy, that's a long, long, long way. You know what I'm saying? So, it's not about going to court, it's about having evidence to give to the judge. The internet has been shut down. No matter technical information you bring, he does not know about it. And he does not believe you. Because court procedure got a way, got a legal way. So that was our main problem. But hopefully we did not experience internet shutdown. So,
Great. Okay, so I will try the hard task of trying to sort of summarize some of the conversations that we've been having. So we talked about norm setting, we talked about misinformation and fake news or disinformation being a problem and being used as a justification to shut down the internet. We also talked about the African Declaration and how that can be used and how it's been used by cases in Cameroon and Reporters Without Borders. We talked about the relationship between traditional media and internet shutdown, and I think what, to the point of our South Sudanese colleague over there, is that definitely internet shutdowns are an extension of the traditional media being shut down. So in many countries that we're talking here, like if you're talking about Ethiopia, Togo, Cameroon, and other, journalists are arrested, civil society organizations are targeted. So it definitely is an extension of the traditional means of censorship. I think Robert's also raised a really interesting point of looking at the information control ecosystem. So seeing it as an ecosystem is much better than just looking at internet shutdowns as one. We also talked about how borders are just fences that you can hop over and then go to use the internet. So I think that's the relationship between Togo and Ghana. And we have many stories from Cameroon and other places where people had to travel to other countries, had to travel and cross borders to sort of connect to the internet. We also talked about the really great example from Senegal and then how Senegal was able to fight internet shutdowns. And I think a big prop to, I think, Ozitik is that they were really prepared in advance, and we didn't reach out to them. They're the ones that reached out to UNI, they're the ones that reached out to us. So really, I think, as Emmanuel said, preparing the ground is very important in this case. For instance, as Access Now, as the Keep It On Coalition, we were caught, we were not ready for instance, for Zimbabwe in the way that the shutdowns had happened. But at least for elections, at least for anniversaries and other things that we know are going to happen, and there's a scheduled date for it. I think these are the things that we can be prepared for, and these are the things that we can do as we move forward. So we talked about strategic litigation and how important that is. There's a case within the ECOWAS courts for the Togo shutdowns that had happened, I think, in 2016. So that should be an interesting one to see and follow. There's a case in Uganda as well that is currently being reviewed by the courts in Kampala. So the judgment, I think there's going to be a judgment either this month or next month in terms of where those litigations are. There was a case in Chad that was thrown away but created some form of transparency into the process. There was a litigation case in Cameroon that was thrown out, and then within the Supreme Court they did not respond to it. Potentially there might be a case in Ethiopia now that we have a space to actually litigate on these things. So we're not just folding our arms and waiting for the internet to come back. And I think what Maria's intervention here as well, saying that as the measurement community, what can we help with? What can we do to make sure that we're assisting you for your advocacy? It's really great to see this kind of activism and this kind of support from the tech community as well, because we definitely do need their assistance in helping them. But it's also, as I think our colleague from Senegal also put, is also understanding that that might not be used as evidence. So we need to prepare in advance to sort of figure out what are the tiny hurdles here and there that are put by governments. Yeah. So with that, I think my last to conclude this panel, I think the Keep It On Coalition is again a coalition of over 190 organizations, civil society organizations that are dedicated to to making sure that internet shutdowns don't happen. If you're a civil society organization, you can join the coalition. We can help you prepare for upcoming shutdowns, predict shutdowns, fight shutdowns, make noise, put out letters, or any other non-violent organizing that you need is a service that the Keep It On Coalition can provide, and you can come and talk to me and these other guys. We're finishing 7 minutes early so that you all can have time to come and talk to the panels if you're shy. We've also been given a note by the organizers to say that lunch is served on the ground floor. You can use the lift to the ground floor, which is 0, strictly between 1:30 p.m. and 2:30 p.m. Tope is the one that said that, so make sure you go get your lunch at 1:30. Thank you so much, everyone, and please give a hand of applause to these awesome guys.